Boys, what is good? It's Herm. We're here today with another mock draft. The sixth one we've done. We did one a week ago for our 90 subscriber special. I'm going to do another one here for our 120 subscriber special. That's right, we're up about 30 subs in the past week alone. I really appreciate that, and we're going to do another mock. Thing about subbing, if you want to see another one in the future, I might do one at like 150 or 160. I'm unsure what it's going to be. It depends on how fast we're growing, but I'll keep you boys updated. But let's get into this. Let's do a mock, full first round. The Rockets, first team on the clock, as always. Worst record in the league this year. This is based fully off of the standings from last season. This is not a random draft order. This is based just on the standings. Once we have the lottery, we'll have a more defined knowledge of what they're going to be. But with the first pick in the draft, the Houston Rockets are going to take Cade Cunningham, the 6'8" point guard out of Oklahoma State. You don't see point guards with his height and blend of athleticism and playmaking all that often. He is a better shooter than a guy like Ben Simmons. I think in terms of his ability on the offensive end, he's very similar to Simmons in his ability to play make, his height for the point guard position, but also a better shooter. Not quite as good of a defender as a Ben Simmons type, but could develop into a better defender. He's not a bad defender by any means, but he needs to work on it a little bit. That's probably the weakest part of his game right now. Good shooter, good playmaker, great height for the point guard position. It's not something you see come around very often. Cade Cunningham is the relative consensus at pick number 1. The Pistons are on the clock at pick number 2. And to me, the second best player in this draft, this is my opinion, is Jalen Green. He has the most upside to me. I think of him in a similar way that I think of Donovan Mitchell. I think of Devin Booker, young guys that are scorers. And we've seen this year with the playoffs that young scorers can lead you to success. Booker and the Suns just advanced to the Western Conference Finals. Donovan Mitchell has the Jazz up 2-1 on the Clippers and has carried the Jazz to all 4 years of his career. Even as a rookie averaging 20 points a game, he carried the Jazz to the playoffs. I know there are some good pieces around him, but scoring in the league is huge, and I think Jalen Green has huge upside. The Pistons already have Killian Hayes at the 1, Saddiq Bey at the 3, Jeremy Grant at the 4, and very good rookie center Isaiah Stewart at the 5. I think that leaves the spot at shooting guard, which works out perfectly because shooting guard Jalen Green is the second best player in this draft to me. So he's drafted second. The Orlando Magic are on the clock at 3, and this is one that I find interesting just because I don't think there's a great option here for them. They already have Cole Anthony and Markelle Fultz at the guard position, so I think taking Jalen Suggs is not necessarily the best idea. They just traded for Wendell Carter Jr., so I don't think Evan Mobley makes a lot of sense either. I know it's a rebuild. You think best player available, but look at what the Sixers did with Embiid, Okafor, and Noel. Yeah, Embiid's a stud, but the other two didn't work out. It doesn't make sense to continually get guys at the same position. So to me, they have to go Jonathan Kuminga, power forward out of the G League Ignite team. Look good for them. Good size, athleticism, has the ability to kind of, overpower, over strength threes at the 3 position when they're guarding him, and has the versatility to kind of, handle 4s because of his ability to play the perimeter as well. So his mix of athleticism and size, strength as well, along with his ability to shoot and space the floor a little bit, really allows him to be kind of versatile with those 3 and 4 positions. Could be very valuable for them. They already have Jonathan Isaac locking up one of their forward positions, and I think Isaac and Kuminga could make a great forward tandem going forward for the Magic. His shooting needs to come a ways, but he's not a bad shooter by any means. The Thunder are on the clock at 4, and this is the pick made in heaven to me because I just love Jalen Suggs' fit on this team. I love the backcourt of Jalen Suggs and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander going forward. I think SGA is likely a shooting guard long term, has played shooting guard so far throughout his career, most of the time. They started Theo Maledon at point guard a lot of games this year, along with George Hill a little at the beginning before they ended up trading him to the 76ers. With the Clippers, he kind of played the shooting guard there as well, with Patrick Beverley playing a lot of the point guard minutes. Chris Paul and Dennis Schroeder played a lot of the point last year. So while Shea can play point, he's been pushed to the 2, and he's done really well there, averaging 23 points per game in a breakout year this year. He's been good all 3 years, but this is his best year by far. But Jalen Suggs would allow them a playmaking point guard to lead them into the future. A very athletic guard. We saw him catching lobs in the NCAA tournament. We saw him creating for others, which is huge. He is a great playmaker. He's not necessarily super aggressive as a lead guard, but I don't think you need that. I don't think the Thunder need that. They have some guys with scoring potential, whether it be Shea, Darius Baisley, Aleksej Pokusevski, or any of their other young guys who have shown some potential. I think they have some scoring. They need some playmaking, and Jalen Suggs can provide that out of Gonzaga. The Cleveland Cavaliers are on the clock at pick number 5. And this one is interesting because I don't think center makes sense for them either. They just drafted... No, they didn't draft. They just traded for Jared Allen, who's a restricted free agent this offseason, but it seems more likely than not that they will bring back the Fro, Jared Allen. One of the best young rim protectors in the entire NBA, has shown a good offensive skill set as well around the basket. I think their biggest need is obviously power forward, with Sexton and Garland in the backcourt, making the Sexland duo, as they've been called, along with Isaac Okoro at the 3, who, while struggling a little offensively in his rookie season, looked very good on the defensive end. So I think for them, power forward makes sense. And the best power forward to me here is Scotty Barnes out of Florida State, listed as a small forward. I think he can play power forward in the league. Big, physical, has a good touch though. He showed a lot at Florida State, a little floater game, his ability to finish softly around the rim, which I think is something that a lot of NBA teams value, is not just some guy that's going to throw people around, but can also finesse people around the rim and finish, with touch. And Scotty Barnes allows that for the Cleveland Cavaliers and fills out the last starting spot in their rebuild. The Golden State Warriors are on the clock at 6, and this is a team where I think you could see a trade. Maybe the Cavaliers trade back as well, because they could get Scotty Barnes or Jalen Johnson later. Who are the 2 power forwards I think they'd be targeting. But the Golden State Warriors here could also trade back because Evan Mobley is still on the board, who I would probably say is the 3rd best player in this draft, is still on the board at 6. So the Warriors would probably think about trading back. They just took Wiseman. I think they need center depth, but they don't need another center this talented. I think it would just make conflict with Wiseman and would hinder both of their developments. So to me, they take the next best player on the board, in my opinion, which is Keon Johnson, the shooting guard out of Tennessee. Is a guy that doesn't need the ball in his hands a lot, more of a slasher kind of role, has a little bit of shooting. I think he'd be a 3-and-D guy long term, good slasher, not going to do much else. Athletic, which helps on the defensive end. He might be a decent defender pretty early on just because of his athleticism, and this allows the Golden State Warriors to kind of ease Klay Thompson back in, because Keon Johnson can get some heavy minutes without feeling too much pressure of needing the ball in his hands. They already have guys like Andrew Wiggins, Kelly Oubre if they re-sign him, a young promising guy in Jordan Poole who can take a lot of the load of the scoring, so Keon Johnson can just get some valuable minutes to kind of develop himself rather than being a lot of pressure put on him right away. I think this is the best destination for Keon Johnson, and it's a good fit with the Warriors. The Toronto Raptors on the clock at 7, and this is the dream fit for them as well because they need a center badly. They have Pascal Siakam at the power forward. They played Chris Boucher a lot of minutes at center this year, but with his shooting and his slight frame, I think Chris Boucher projects as slightly more of a power forward going forward, and they have a really, really solid center here on the board. One that could be a all-star long-term, I believe. Evan Mobley is one of the last guys still on the board with all-star potential. I think you could argue Jalen Johnson, Davion Mitchell still have some, but outside of that, we're getting to the end of all-star kind of possible guys. You never know, some guys might surprise, but in terms of likely all-stars, we're getting nearing the end of that. But Evan Mobley is here, and he's the easy pick for me with the Raptors. Gives them a franchise center long-term. Would probably be their biggest piece right away. Pascal Siakam kind of regressed a little this year, in my opinion. Still put up decent numbers, but just his game didn't look as good, and it didn't produce wins. They have Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, Gary Trent Jr., who I'm very high on, but I think Evan Mobley would project as their best player long term. The Orlando Magic, back on the clock at 8. They picked Jonathan Kuminga at pick number 3. So to me right now, they need shooting. They need shooting badly. Mitchell's not the pick. They already have the 2 guards like we talked about earlier with Fultz and Cole Anthony, along with RJ Hampton, who they got in the Aaron Gordon trade. So to me, they have to go with the best shooter in this class, which is Corey Kispert out of Gonzaga. He's not a guy that's probably going to give you a ton outside of shooting, but was a 4-year college player, very experienced, and come in kind of contribute right away. I look at him similarly to how I looked at Buddy Hield coming out of college. Buddy Hield has kind of developed into more of a three-dimensional scorer, being able to score at the 3-point, the mid-range, and around the rim. But who knows if Kispert will be quite that, but I think Kispert could be a very good NBA player. Think of other, more spot-up shooting kind of players, even spot-up shooting forwards. Think of Nikola Mirotic, Nico Melli, even JJ Redick is just a spot-up shooting kind of role. I think Corey Kispert could provide that for the Magic and would be a good fit in a forward role, kind of a reserve role immediately for them. The Kings are on the clock at 9. This is an interesting one because I really like Davion Mitchell and the potential to make kind of like a 3-guard backcourt similar to what the Thunder had last year with Chris Paul, Shea, and Dennis Schroeder, but I don't think the Kings will end up doing that. I don't think they want to crowd their guard position, and with Harrison Barnes as one of your forwards, Marvin Bagley hasn't kind of panned out. I think Rashawn Holmes is their center long term. I think Fox and Halliburton is their backcourt long term, so to me they go power forward, and a guy with a lot of potential in Jalen Johnson is a guy that has shown flashes, left Duke early, to kind of just prepare for the draft. A lot of people labeling him as a quitter because of that. I think that's a little harsh. I think it's unfair to question Jalen Johnson's work ethic because of that. I think he'll still come in and work hard in the NBA. And he was a guy, if he had stayed in college, I think would be a little higher. Maybe not in that top tier, the 5 guys that pretty much everybody agrees upon, but he could be seen as the 6th or 7th best prospect rather than number 9 where he is ranked here. Not necessarily going to create his own shot right away, but is a guy that can, finish around the rim, will throw down dunks on people, very athletic, a put-back score right away, can get rebounds, go back up, finish that, and I think the Kings would like that. Kind of take Marvin Bagley's role, because I think Bagley gets moved in the offseason. Harrison Barnes might honestly as well, which would leave them very thin at the forward positions, and they could bring in Jalen Johnson to fill that role. The New Orleans Pelicans are on the clock at pick number 10. I think they need a shooter. I think they need a shooter badly. I like the idea of Davion Mitchell here, but I don't think point guard is necessarily quite as much of a need as they need shooting. Davion Mitchell's shooting is a little limited. They have Kira Lewis, who they just drafted last year. Even if Lonzo Ball leaves, they have Kira Lewis and Eric Bledsoe at the point guard position. Eric Bledsoe is definitely on the downslope of his career, but Kira Lewis could be very good, very fast point guard for them. And I think they're going to take shooting. And some people might not like this. Some might say it's a reach. ESPN has him ranked a lot lower than people like Bleacher Report do. But Moses Moody out of Arkansas, the point guard, shooting guard, can still kind of play that guard role. It's being reported Josh Hart wants a change of scenery, who's currently their best shooting guard. So he can fill in that shooting guard role. He could take the point guard role, but Moses Moody will come in and take that right away. Is a guy that projects as a good shooter long term, a pretty good shooter at Arkansas. A very good defender, will be one of the best defenders on this team right away. Maybe outside of Bledsoe, who is still a very underrated defender. Bledsoe's shot has struggled, but he is still a good defender in this league. But to me, Moses Moody is the pick here because of his shooting and his defensive potential. The Hornets are on the clock at 11. And the Hornets, to me, while I still love Davion Mitchell, I'm upset he's still on the board. But to me, they need a big man. And they're going to go Isaiah Jackson, who is a rim protector. Not a great offensive player, but is a good rim protector. Think of impact guys like this. Rudy Gobert, Clint Capella, great rim protectors, kind of limited offensively, but good rebounders as well. Isaiah Jackson would play the center for them. Led the nation in blocks this year as a freshman, I believe, at just over three a game, and played really well at Kentucky. Was one of the lone bright spots in a really rough season for them. And he's a guy that will impact the Hornets right away. Fill in immediately to Cody Zeller's starting center role, and I think would make a good impact and fits very well on this Hornets team. The San Antonio Spurs are on the clock at 12. Ooh, I don't really want to go Mitchell here either. It's tough because I think it's, relatively accepted that DeMar DeRozan's going to leave in free agency. So I wouldn't mind a guy that's like a athletic forward, maybe even a shooting guard you could push to the three. I'm going to take James Bouknight out of UConn, a guy that a lot of people see with a really, potential offensive dynamo. I don't know if I necessarily see him as much as that. Is a very good defender, will be a good defender right away. Fits Popovich's identity with that in terms of good defense, which he stresses very hard. But also is a guy that isn't selfish, will give up the ball. Fits, the idea of also the Spurs of ball movement is a big, staple of Spurs basketball. I think Bouknight would come in for them and be a very good player for them. Very athletic, would be one of the flashiest players we've seen for the Spurs in a while. And I think people would really like a lineup of, let's say, DeJounte Murray, either Lonnie Walker or Devin Vassell, James Bouknight at the 3, Keldon Johnson at the 4, and Jakob Poeltl at the 5, who's one of the most underrated centers in the league. Very, very good defender. We saw that in the play-in game. Also a very good finisher right around the rim. I'm going to take Bouknight out of UConn, the sophomore, at pick number 12. The Pacers on the clock at 13. And here's where I'm going to make the move. Davion Mitchell cannot stay on the board any longer. He has to come off at 13. Aaron Holiday was once a guy that Pacer fans really thought had a lot of potential as the point guard for them long term, but had a rough season this year. Aaron Holiday had a rough season this year, has shown potential, but it was not a great season for him. I think TJ McConnell might get lured away from Indiana. Someone might offer him the bag. It's being reported that the Cavaliers are really interested in TJ McConnell, so I think they will need a guard, a kind of a backup guard behind Malcolm Brogdon for now. It's been rumored they've been willing to move guys like Brogdon, Turner, Sabonis, TJ Warren even. We might see a full-scale rebuild from the Pacers. So if you're looking at it with that mentality, they have to go best player available. And to me, that's easily Davion Mitchell, the speedy, athletic point guard out of Baylor. Think of De'Aaron Fox is the way I think of Davion Mitchell. Maybe will not ever be Fox's level, but could be a guy that's like right here. I think they have very comparable games, and I really like Mitchell's play style. And his aggressiveness, speed, also his underrated playmaking. The Warriors on the clock again at pick number 14. And to me, I really like backup center. Like, they couldn't go Mobley at pick number 6 because I think it would have made, kind of like a what is it called? A conflict at the center position. But to have a good reserve center would be big for them. And I think that's Alperen Sengun out of Turkey. Was a Turkish League MVP at only 18 years old this year. Fantastic finisher around the rim, but also showed, improved flashes of shooting and playmaking, which has really enticed NBA scouts. Sengun is one of the flyers up the draft board and could be taken before this pick. I wouldn't be surprised if Sengun is, taken as a top 10 pick. I would say that's a reach a little bit, but I really like Sengun, and I think he provides a lot of finishing around the rim and rebounding, which could really help your team in terms of quick offense off the bench from a center. The Wizards on the clock at 15. I think they have to go best player available. The Wizards have a lot of holes outside of Russ and Beal. I think Daniel Gafford has looked really good in the center spot for them this year, especially since they traded for him. He did really well at the end of the regular season, but really showed out to a national audience in the playoffs and looked really good for them in terms of a finisher and a rim protector. So to me, they got to go Franz Wagner, who can kind of do a similar role to what Davis Bertans does for them. But Bertans had a rough year. Maybe Wagner comes in and does Bertans' role a little better than he does, and they could end up moving on from Bertans. It'd be tough to move that contract because it's like $15 million for the next 4 years, which I believe is $60 million left on Bertans' deal. But I think Wagner can come in and do a similar role to that, to what we saw from Bertans 2 years ago. I think Wagner can be that kind of player for them. The Celtics are on the clock at 16, and to me, I really like backup center depth. They have Robert Williams, who's a young center who I really like for them long term. I think Tristan Thompson is probably out after this year. It's being rumored they might move Kemba Walker, might move Marcus Smart. So if they do that before the draft, you could see them obviously look point guard here. But assuming that they haven't moved either of those players yet, I think they go big man. And to me, that's Kai Jones, the athletic center out of Texas. Very similar player to Robert Williams. It's kind of that idea where if you have one that works out, that's great. If both work out, that's even better. So Kai Jones can play a kind of relief role to Robert Williams, an athletic finisher, and a good rebounder. A guy that you'd like to have. I think his defense needs a little work, but good finisher around the rim. Very aggressive, athletic attacker. The Grizzlies on the clock at 17. I don't think the Grizzlies have any obvious needs. I think they can take a risk here and go a guy with a lot of potential that could develop into a very good player. The best international player in this draft to me is Josh Giddey out of Australia. A good shooter, a very smooth, kind of finesse game where you'll see a lot of finger rolls, finishes around the rim. I think Manu Ginobili is kind of how I think of Josh Giddey. A player that's very smooth, fun to watch. Isn't going to wow you necessarily with his athleticism, but just the way he plays feels very relaxed and very smooth. And I like that from Josh Giddey. I think he's a guy that could end up being like a 18 points per game night kind of guy if he develops right, and I think Memphis has the ability to kind of slowly bring him along, and I think that would be perfect for Josh Giddey and would allow him the best chance to succeed long term and would allow Memphis with a possible star down the road. The Thunder on the clock at 18 already went Jalen Suggs, so I would want a forward here, right? But I think any forward here is a reach, unless it's Garuba. I know they have a pick again soon, so you know what? I'm not going to reach. I'm not going to reach on Garuba. I'm not as high on his upside as some other people. I'm going to take Zaire Williams, who coming into the year was a lottery projected player. Kind of struggled a little bit at stretches, but had some really hot stretches as well. Very good shooter. Has the potential to be a very good scorer. If they have a potential future lineup of, let's say, Suggs, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Zaire Williams, Lou Dort, Lou Dort would probably be at the 3. Zaire can play the 4. He's tall enough if you want to. And Pokashevsky as a center. You're playing a very 5-out modern lineup that has the potential to be very lethal offensively. And I like Zaire's offensive potential long term. Defensive concerns are obviously there. But I like his chance to bounce back, kind of like what we saw from Cam Reddish this year, a guy that struggled in college but ended up bouncing back in the pros. And I like Zaire Williams' potential, has a lot more potential than the guys ranked ahead of him. The Knicks are on the clock at 19. I don't necessarily know what to do here, because I really like Sharif Cooper to them, but Knicks fans have told me they're not huge fans of that. Jared Butler, it sounds like a very, pro-Knicks move. I've heard Knicks fans really like that idea, but Jared Butler feels a little too safe to me for what the Knicks are doing. Ayo Dosunmu is a guy that is, willing for the spotlight, I'm going to go Cam Thomas, who's slipping a little on ESPN's rankings, dropped all the way to 25. That's ridiculous. Cam Thomas is a lottery talent level player, great scorer, can be a fantastic scorer for the Knicks right away, whether that's off the bench or in the starting two-guard spot. If they wanted to go really young, they could go a lineup of Quickly, Cam Thomas, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, and Mitchell Robinson, which I think would be very good and very, good for your team long term to develop a lineup like that. And I think Cam Thomas provides them with an easy 15 points per game right away. Maybe not 15, okay, that might be aggressive, but 12 points per game right away or something like that for Cam Thomas. Scoring comes easy to him. Let's just say it that way. It's very easy for Cam Thomas to score. Came in, averaged over 20 points a game as a freshman, basically unheard of in college. His work ethic is ridiculous. He played 40 minutes like almost every game down the stretch of the season, and he's a guy that will come in and will work, which will really, Tom Thibodeau will love that. He loves guys like that. That's why he was such a big Jimmy Butler fan. And I think Cam Thomas would come and he would fit Tibbs' system really well. And he also provide the Knicks with some scoring that they need along with their already great defense. The Hawks are on the clock at 20. I don't know what to do for the Hawks. I don't think they have any glaring needs. So to me, I'm going to go... What do I want to go? I'm going to go a guy with some more defensive potential, and to me that's Jared Butler, a guy that provides, kind of defense in that guard spot. Trae Young obviously has some defensive concerns, but Jared Butler maybe long-term could potentially shadow Trae in terms of kind of covering up his weaknesses. So Jared Butler's defense would overshadow Trae's weaknesses on that end, and Jared Butler is a very solid player all around, one of the most complete players in this draft, in that he's good at defense, good shooter, good playmaker. He's not necessarily fantastic in any area, but is very good at a lot of different things, and the Hawks would love to have that. One of the most safe picks in this draft, I think, is Jared Butler, a guy that will find himself a role because he's just good at so many things. The Knicks on the clock again at 21, already taking Cam Thomas with their first pick, and I'm sure they would have loved to go with, what am I thinking here? With who's the last guy I just picked? I'm blanking. With Jared Butler, their fans would have loved that. It would have made a lot of sense to me as well, but he's off the board. So if I'm the Knicks, I think here they already have a lot of players that make sense. I don't hate Springer for them as a backup point guard, but I'm going to go Garuba, who is slipping a little. The Knicks have the ability to bet on a guy's potential long term. Garuba is a good rebounder, lacks a little size for the way he plays. He likes to, play very physical in terms of getting rebounds, playing good defense, and bodying people in the post, which at 6'8" might not work in the NBA, but it worked for Draymond for a while, so who knows, it might end up working out. Needs to work on a lot of areas of his game in order to stick around in the league, but I think he's a guy that could be good with time. The Lakers are on the clock at pick 22, and I think here is where we'll see a guy in between Sharife Cooper and Jaden Springer. I'm going to go with Sharife A. Cooper, who is one of the best playmakers in this draft. Lakers need playmaking. Schroeder was a good scorer for them, but he's not necessarily a great playmaker. A good playmaker, don't get me wrong, but not great. LeBron, we saw how it worked when he played point guard last year. He got injured a lot this year. Point guard was too much of a grueling thing for LeBron to take in all year long. So I think that they need a guard in order to, kind of help with that. And Sharife Cooper is one of the most talented players in this draft. Has a lot of potential long term to be really solid. Maybe he won't start right away, but he'd be a good scoring reserve, a good playmaker. His scoring, along with his playmaking, reminds me kind of shades of Trae Young, just because he's such a good scorer and playmaker. Not as good of a shooter as Trae Young, but good scorer, average about 15 points a game, along with 7 to 8 assists a game. Gotta love Sharife Cooper. I think he would fit very well in the Lakers, and they'd love to have him. The Rockets are on with pick 23. I think they need a center. I do. The best center to me on the board is Charles Bassey. They have Christian Wood as the power forward who can shoot really well, space the floor. Charles Bassey will not space the floor, but he will get rebounds. He will finish. Think of him as what Clint Capella used to be in Houston, and he can play that role for them. For the Rockets now, Cade Cunningham will be their point long term. I think they can put next to him Trey Mann, who is still on the board, one of the best scorers in the draft. A lethal step back is what Trey Mann has showcased that in the NCAA tournament, and a couple wins for them. Trey Mann looked very solid in the tournament, is a guy with a lot of potential long term, decided to come back as a sophomore after a kind of disappointing freshman season, and it worked out very well for Trey Mann. I think he improved his draft stock, and he'll likely get picked before 24, but you never know. Very good scorer, is a guy that the Rockets could use in terms of scoring. They have some good defenders already, whether it be Jae'Sean Tate, KJ Martin, Daniel House, but I think they need a little more offensive firepower, and Trey Mann would bring that. The Clippers are on the clock at 25, and they need a point guard, and to me that is Jaden Springer, the athletic point guard out of Tennessee, part of that electric duo with him and Keon Johnson, who we saw go top 10. Jaden Springer is a good shooter, is a good defender, a 3-and-D player right away, also can finish around the rim, is a player that has the talent to go higher, but some work ethic concerns, also with some concerns over, his height. Is 6'4" for a point guard isn't bad, but if you're not a fantastic point guard, it can bring some issues sometimes when you go against bigger point guards, 6'6" to 6'10" range, which we're seeing more and more of these days. But I love Jaden Springer, very great offensive player, could take Patrick Beverley's starting point guard role, who I hate as their point guard. If you watch any of my videos, you know I'm not a fan of Patrick Beverley as the Clippers starting point guard, and Jaden Springer can take that role and run with it. Very athletic, good finisher, would help guys like Paul George and Kawhi, could take some load off of them. Maybe they could move Patrick Beverley, keep Reggie Jackson and Jaden Springer. I think that would be a much better point guard duo than what they have currently. Not a fan of Patrick Beverley. Is not really a good defender, just talks a lot and gets up in people's face. But he's more bark than bite in my opinion. Jaden Springer to the Clippers at 25. The Nuggets at pick 26. I don't think they have any huge needs, but after moving Gary Harris and RJ Hampton, I think their shooting guard depth is not great. They have Monte Morris, who played a little bit, but he's more of a backup point guard. They have Will Barton, who I think is honestly more of a small forward. So they have guys that are really other positions that they're playing at the 2 right now. So I think they should go 2 guard. And to me, the best 2 guard right now on the board is Ayo Dosunmu. Huge Kobe fan. I talked about that every time because I'm a huge Kobe fan. But he's got that Mamba mentality. He's taking pictures after games, holding the trophy, recreating the Kobe pictures. And I just love to see it. He's a hard worker. He is a guy that is not afraid of the moment, and he's a guy that is a very good scorer, will provide some scoring to the Nuggets right away, and I think has the potential to develop into like a 15 points per game a night guy. This draft is one of the deepest in years, by the way. We're still seeing guys that I think are just about near lottery level talent going at pick 26, which I think is crazy. This is one of the deepest drafts in years. I'm super excited for it. The Nets. They have Nick Claxton at center. They just drafted a guy last year too, who plays some power forward center for them. So I'm gonna go backup guard, an athletic guard, a 3-and-D guy. Chris Duarte out of Oregon. Right now their backup guards are kind of Tyler Johnson and TLC, who have really struggled to actually look good. Their backup guards have not provided a lot of great minutes for them this season. They have some great guards already, whether it be Dinwiddie, Kyrie, Harden, or Joe Harris, who've looked good in starting spots. But their bench guys have just been really rough. Chris Duarte can provide some athleticism. 3-and-D guys are easy plugs for playoff teams, and I think it makes sense to go Chris Duarte here out of Oregon. The Sixers are picking at pick 28. What do I think their biggest need is? I think it's either shooting guard or small forward, because they start Danny Green at one of those 2 spots, Seth Curry at the other. I really like Seth Curry for them. I do. I like Maxey and Shake Milton for them long term. So I think point guard and shooting guard is okay. I would rather go like a small forward here. I don't know which to go, because I think Marcus Bagley and BJ Boston have more potential long term, but I think Aaron Henry provides a lot of immediate impact. Aaron Henry is a guy that is a good shooter and a good defender. I think Aaron Henry could have a very similar development to a guy like Mikal Bridges, who the Sixers drafted on draft night and then traded, which was so dumb. Mikal Bridges looks so good for the Suns right now and would be a perfect fit on the Sixers. So I'm going to have to go Aaron Henry, the 6'6 shooting guard small forward out of Michigan State, who's been developed very well by Tom Izzo. The Suns on the clock at 29, and I'm just going to go scoring. Max Abmas is the best scorer on the board. Is a guy that averaged like over 30 points a game in the NCAA tournament. For Oral Roberts' very surprising Sweet 16 run was absolutely shocking, actually, as a 15 seed that they went as far as they did. And almost all of that was Abmas. O'Banner is pretty good for them as well. But Max Abmas, fantastic player. Kind of short, but a very good scorer. Think similar to Isaiah Thomas' role. Not his MVP top 5 finish year, but kind of his more reserve years, but still a guy that gives you just about 16 points a game. Max Abmas can be that scorer for the Suns off the bench. Maybe long term they could try to develop him into their lead guard. The Jazz, with the last pick, are on the clock at 30, and at the 30th pick you obviously go best potential, right? There's a better fit for them than potential, honestly. Ooh, I really like most of their positions, too. I'm going to go Filip Petrusev, who is the best shooting big in this draft. A very good floor spacer at the 4/5 spot. 7 foot. Used to play at Gonzaga, went back overseas and played a year. Did very well, improved his draft stock. Great shooter. Will come in and be the best, kind of big shooter for the Jazz right away, because they have Rudy Gobert at the center spot, Derek Favors, neither of which are great shooters. I think Petrusev would be a nice fit off the bench to kind of give a little change of pace and roles, which I really like for them. And I think it's a fit that some might question. They're like, they already have Rudy Gobert, why do they need Petrusev? But I just like the change of pace. I think it'd be really interesting and a great pick for the Jazz. This is the draft. I'll go through slowly. I'll scroll through so you guys could pause and look at them if you're really interested. But that's all we have for today. Thank you so much for 120 subscribers. I appreciate it so much. Hopefully you enjoyed me rambling on and talking about this draft. I love the NBA draft. I could talk about it for a lot longer than I did. The NBA draft intrigues me so much, and I'm a huge fan. I hope you guys enjoy the channel. You love the draft content. You love the trade content. Hopefully it all is very interesting to you and you really enjoy it, because I enjoy making it and kind of talking about it, and seeing you guys enjoy it is very fulfilling to me, and I really appreciate that. But if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like. Think about subscribing. We're trying to hit 200 by July. If we keep up the current pace of this week, we will hit that pretty easily. But I need you guys to subscribe and to help a brother out, because I'm trying to get big on YouTube here, reach my goal of being a YouTuber and talking about sports for a living, which I love. But that's all I have for today. Hopefully you boys enjoyed, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.